Hello, my name is Don Barrar and I'm a realtor in Scottsdale, Arizona. In this episode of Arizona Real Estate, I will discuss due diligence for residential resale properties. I'll also discuss the buyer's inspection notice and seller's response. The state of Arizona's residential resale purchase contract has a section called Due Diligence. This is the portion of the contract that calls out the terms and conditions for the buyer's review of the property before proceeding with any purchase. Your state may have a similar process. The timings in this section of the contract are very specific. After getting the property under contract, the buyer has 10 days or some other specified time to conduct due diligence. During the due diligence period, the buyer should investigate the following physical conditions of the property: roof, plumbing, HVAC and electrical systems, repairs and remodeling and new construction, living area, swimming pools, spas and associated barriers, septic and other on-site water treatment facilities, sewer, water and well issues, soil problems, previous flood or fire, pests, endangered and threatened species, deaths and felonies on property, indoor environmental concerns, property boundaries, flood insurance and floodplain status, and insurance claims. The buyer should also investigate conditions affecting the surrounding area, environmental concerns, electromagnetic fields, Superfund sites, freeway construction and traffic, crime statistics, sex offenders, forested areas, military and public airports, zoning, planning and neighborhood services, schools, and city profile report. Now that's a lot to do in 10 days. I'm not suggesting that each of these items be reviewed. It's up to the buyer as to what they believe is important depending on the situation. If you selected a particular neighborhood, you may have already reviewed conditions affecting the surrounding area. For example, crime statistics, schools, traffic conditions, etc. Whatever inspections you choose, it's still a lot to do in 10 days. If you are the buyer and you want more time to conduct inspections, it needs to be negotiated upfront at the time of contract. Otherwise, it can only be changed through an addendum that both the buyer and the seller must execute. Good luck with that. Most sellers are not going to be willing to change the due diligence process after execution of the purchase contract. Do not let the due diligence period pass without completing the buyer's inspection notice and seller's response, otherwise known as the BINSR. If you let this time pass and do not submit the BINSR, then you're on the hook to complete the sale of the property and close escrow. Here's the Arizona BINSR. There are 3 pages. Pages 1 and 2 contains buyer's inspections and investigations completed. And page 3 contains the seller's response and buyer's election. Let's look at the buyer's inspections and investigations completed. The buyer has 3 choices. Premises accepted. No further action is required. Buyer signs off the BINSR and the contract proceeds. Premises rejected. Buyer disapproves items listed below and immediately elects to cancel the contract. Buyer must list the reasons why the property is being rejected. The reasons must be material. For example, the air conditioning system doesn't work, the roof leaks, cracks in the sidewalk, too much traffic, etc. The more reasons, the better. Now, this next statement that I'm going to make is very important. One of the reasons can never be that the buyer changed mind. Changed mind is not a good reason. Making that statement on a BINSR, that buyer changed mind, may result in loss of earnest money. Never, ever make this statement on a BINSR. 3. Buyer elects to provide the seller an opportunity to correct the disapproved items listed below. If the buyer elects to provide the seller the opportunity to correct disapproved items, the buyer must enumerate each item that the buyer wants the seller to correct. In addition, the buyer can also ask the seller the following. In lieu of making these corrections, buyer would accept a reduction in selling price by X amount to be memorialized in an addendum executed by both buyer and seller. 2 important points. The buyer cannot just ask for a reduction in selling price. The buyer must also give the seller the opportunity of either correcting items or making a price reduction of some amount. Point 2. This is the buyer's only chance to request that the seller make corrections to the property. As a mentor of mine once said, buyer only gets one chance for a bite at the apple. If you want corrections, make sure that you get them into the BINSR. There will be no other opportunities. Let's look at the third and final page of the BINSR. Assume that the buyer's inspection notice has been completed for corrections to the property and sent to the seller's agent prior to expiration of the due diligence period. The seller now has 5 days to respond to the buyer's inspection notice. The seller can respond in the following 3 ways. Seller agrees to correct items disapproved by buyer. Seller is unwilling or unable to correct any of the items disapproved by buyer. Seller's response to the buyer's notice is as follows. If the seller selects this option, the seller will then enumerate what repairs they are willing to make. The seller may also respond with a price reduction in lieu of making any repairs. Any price reduction must be accompanied by an addendum to be executed by both buyer and seller. Assume the seller responds to the inspection notice during the 5-day period and is elected to either not correct any disapproved items, or is willing to correct some of the disapproved items, or offers a reduction in price in lieu of making repairs. The buyer now has 5 days to either accept the seller's response or cancel the contract. It is important that the buyer respond to the seller's response. If the buyer fails to cancel the contract within 5 days of the seller's response, buyer is obligated to close escrow and the seller will not have to make any repairs. Let's summarize what's been discussed. Most states have a due diligence process for residential resale properties. In Arizona, the standard purchase contract has a due diligence period of 10 days for the buyer to inspect the property and request corrections. Corrections are requested via the BINSR. This is the only opportunity for the buyer to request corrections. The seller has 5 days to formally respond to the buyer's inspection notice. The buyer then has 5 days to respond to the seller's response. Changes to any of these timings can only be done at time of contract or through an addendum executed by both buyer and seller. Okay, that's it. Hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please post them below. If you've not already subscribed, please do so, and I'll be certain to make more great videos to help you with your understanding of the real estate process. Talk with you soon.